Good morning. We're going to start with a warm-up as usual. So I need you to read this through and look at the weather map and write it down in your spiral. I will read the questions and then your teacher will pause it and then I will go over the answers. And don't forget, if you need to use your notes, you need to have your notes out and you need to be looking through them. It says use the map to answer the following questions. Number 1. Which of the cities will experience the passage of a cold front over the next several days? Explain your reasoning. And number 2, are there any cities that will not be affected by the cold front? And how do you know? So that means in your notebook you should have 2 answers with complete sentences and reasons. So number 1. Which city will experience a cold front over the next couple of days? That would be City B. City A has already experienced the cold front. You need to look at the direction that the triangles are pointing. The triangles are pointing towards City B, which means it is headed that direction. For number 2, are there any cities that will not be affected by the cold front? How do you know? If you take a look at the way that the cold front is going, it's about to hit City B shortly, but then you have that jet stream passing through the country. And if you're not sure what the jet stream is, you will be learning about that soon. But the jet stream is exactly what it sounds like. It's a stream of air that moves through. And the pattern of the jet stream right now in this picture, once that cold front heads that way, the jet stream is going to kind of carry that cold front in that general direction or move it away from City C. So City C will not experience that cold front because of the jet stream. Okay, the next thing that I need you to do is I need you to get your notebooks out. You're going to be taking just a very short amount of notes today. You need to write everything that you see on the slide down in your notebook. You need to take complete notes. If it's underlined, you might want to underline it, okay? Some of it goes with what you saw in the Erasma from last week, if you got to it. And then you're going to be doing a worksheet over this topic as a review. So today we're going to be talking about air masses. It kind of goes along with the weather fronts that we talked about on Friday. So please start writing this down as I talk about it. An air mass is a large body of air that has similar temperatures, humidities, and air pressures throughout. So when we're talking about a huge body of air, we mean like 1,000 miles or more. They're huge. They could take up half of the country sometimes. Very, very large bodies of air. So they're classified by their characteristics. They're classified by temperature, they're classified by how humid they are, they're classified by whether they're high or low pressure. And remember what we talked about on Friday, air masses may bump into each other and form a front, but they do not mix. It's very important that you remember that. So there are 4 different types of air masses, and you need to know these 4 different types. There are tropical, polar, maritime, and continental air masses. Tropical air masses are warm. If you think about, going on vacation to a tropical place, it's usually very warm all the time. So tropical air masses are warm. They form from the tropics and they have low pressure. Polar air masses, if you think about the North and South poles, okay, it's cold air masses and they have high pressure. Maritime air masses, okay, maritime means the ocean, so they form over the ocean, and so they're going to have a lot of humidity. They're picking up all the moisture from the water. And continental air masses are dry because they form over the land, so in the middle of a continent, which means they don't have much moisture. So these 4 words are used to describe air masses based on where the air masses form. And we use the words in combination with each other to describe the air mass. So we use a lowercase, 1 lowercase, and 1 uppercase letter together to describe an air mass. And please look at the map as well. And like I said, you may have seen this last week during the Erasma if you got to it. So predicting the temperature and humidity, basically you have to look at where an air mass originates from to determine the temperature and humidity. And then based on that, you assign it one of the words we just talked about, the tropical, polar, maritime, or continental. And you put two of the words together to determine that air mass name. And like I said, the first letter is lowercase, the second letter is always uppercase. So we have 5 different combinations that we can have for naming air masses. We have maritime polar, maritime tropical, continental tropical, continental polar, and continental Arctic. And so if you look on the map, you can see their origin. So if one originates right here, where I'm pointing, over the ocean, we would call it maritime. And if it originates up near the poles, like this one, then we would call it polar. So we put the two together and we would call it lowercase m, capital P, maritime polar. Over here would also be a maritime polar because it's over the ocean and it's up near the poles. The one right here is way up near the Arctic Circle or the North Pole, so we would call that a continental Arctic. This one down here is lower. It's still found over the land, so we would call it continental, but it's still near the northern part, which is chillier, so we call it a continental polar. This one here is near the tropics or closer to the equator, and it's in the water, so we call that a maritime tropical air mass. Same with the one over here. This is over the Caribbean Sea, so maritime tropical as well. The one in the center is over land, but still near the equator, so we would call that a continental tropical. So when you're naming an air mass, you just look for, is it over water or is it over land? And then you look for the temperature. Is it warm or is it cold? And then you put the two words together to name it. And then you can use the appropriate abbreviation. So make sure you have this written in your notebook because you will need it for later. Okay, this next part is giving your opinion. You just choose the number of the answer that you think is correct. The sun warms the Earth's atmosphere primarily because, and choose one. So number 1, the sunlight is absorbed by the atmosphere. 2, the light and heat that comes from the sun are absorbed by the atmosphere. 3, the sunlight is absorbed by the land and oceans. 4, the light and heat that comes from the sun are absorbed by the land and oceans. Or 5, the infrared light from the sun warms the earth. Choose the answer that you think is correct and just jot it down in your notebook. And the correct answer is number 3. The sunlight is absorbed by the land and the oceans. Okay, if you think about it, we've been talking about that the whole time. We talk about radiation, and we talk about how the sun drives convection. So it's definitely number 3. This is just a review. Remember what we talked about last week. We talked about the 3 major types of fronts. Now, you don't need to write this because you already have it. But we talked about air masses today. Air masses are moving across the land and across the ocean. So we have the maritime and the continental, the ones with moisture and the ones that are dry. They bump into each other and form a front. They meet, but they do not mix. And as a result, we can have 3 types of fronts. We have cold fronts, we have warm fronts, and we have stationary fronts. So just make sure that you know your fronts. You remember what a cold front is. You remember the cold front symbol. You remember what a warm front is and the warm front symbol. And also what a stationary front is. Okay, and the stationary front symbol. And that's just a review, like I said, remember, because it will be on your exam. But for today, we're just going to focus on the air masses and naming the air masses. So, as long as you have those notes, your teacher's going to give you the worksheet now. And it looks like this. Okay, so your job for the remainder of the period is to fill this out based on what you know about air masses. So the first part, please read the instructions. Okay, write true if the statement is true. If the statement is false, change the underlined term or word to make it true. So if it's false, you need to correct it. For part B, you're labeling these with the appropriate names. So it would be maritime polar, maritime tropical, continental tropical, continental polar. So look at where the air mass is, okay, and determine what the name should be. Use your notes. And then down here, you answer the questions based on the name of the air mass, okay? And if everyone finishes, then your teacher will go over the answers and then collect your work. This is for a grade, so make sure that you are all on task and make sure you turn it in with your name on it before you leave. Okay, otherwise, make sure you have your notes and make sure you are ready to go for class tomorrow because you will be interpreting weather maps. Have a great day.